Let's give it up again for Deborah Winters. I love spiritual synchronicities, and I believe they happen all the time, and sometimes they're right in your face. You're like, God is participating in my life right here and right now. And for those of you that may not know, Deborah Winters and I have been friends for more than 10 years. We worked together at Unity in Marin for many years as one of the musicians there. And I had no idea when I was asked to come out here and speak that she was going to be the musical guest, right? So she contacted me about 4 or 5 days ago and said, we're going to be working together. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That is so awesome. That's how Spirit works. And in fact, when Ken called me and he said, Bill, we'd like you to come out and speak. And I'm like, oh, that's great. I'm looking forward to it. What would you like me to speak on? What topic? And he said, well, it's a month of service. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I could have gotten a PhD in service over the last year about looking at different ways to show up and different ways that I've been called to show up in service in my life and the lives of others that have been very different over the last year. As Deanne said, I was at Unity in Marin as a senior minister there for 12 years, and I was called upon to be in a different kind of a service. And that different kind of a service was to be with my elderly parents in their 90s, living in a small town in Colorado. Moved in with my sister and brother-in-law in a house that was not yet complete. And my sister and brother-in-law needed a lot of work, a lot of help. And my parents, they needed a lot of help. And I knew there's no way I could continue in a full-time job and to be available to my parents at this stage in their life in the way that I felt I needed to be. Now, there's one thing when you're the senior minister at a congregation and you're speaking to hundreds of people, you get a lot of positive feedback, not exclusively. But you get a lot of positive feedback, and people come up and they shake your hand, they hear you talk, or they send you an email. We're listening from Sweden every Sunday, and we love it, and it's great. You feel really good about it. It's very visible. I mean, it was very much service. And to me, it was a wonderful calling. One of the highlights of my life was to be the senior minister at Unity in Marin, and I'll always treasure that. But that was a very, very visible position of being in service to others. And in a heartbeat, after I had left there and I went out to small town Colorado, and I'm helping my brother-in-law cut ceramic tile, mix cement, be in a town where I knew no one, and be able to be there and be the carpenter, to be the handyman, to do all the kind of work that I could in supporting him and getting this house done so that my parents could have part of it and they could live together. And so I was serving in that capacity. And then, of course, I'm serving my parents. And they live in this small town. We're going to town is actually a 20-minute drive to town. I'm a city guy. That's a long way. So what my mom, I found out, does now in her 90s is she wants to go to the Walmart every day. I have no idea why. It's a pilgrimage. We got to go. We drive. We get all kinds of stuff. I'm like, I think we've gotten everything. It's a big store, and so we do that. I'm driving her there. I'm working on the house, and then there's being with my father. And my father at 91, he's got Parkinson's. Dementia is setting in. He can start asking me, what day is it, like 15 times in an hour kind of thing. And anybody who's been a caregiver, you know how that is. And his highlight of the day is watching Let's Make a Deal and Judge Judy. I have no idea why. If I never see either of those shows again in my life, I'm fine with that. And so there's that kind of support and being with them. And it's I don't understand it, but when I'm 90, who knows what I'll be watching on television and thinking it's cool. Exactly. But then there's the other side of that too. There's changing my father's diapers. That's given him a shower. And I can tell you there's many, many people I know now over the years that are in service in that way. And when you're doing that, I guarantee you there is no applause. There's appreciation. There's my dad feeling embarrassed that somebody has to do that, especially his son, that he has to do that for him. I saw it as sacred service. But it's a totally different kind of service. And if any of you have been caregivers here, just raise your hand. If you ever cared for anyone, you know what a commitment that is. And unlike a visible job where you're in service and you get paid, where you're helping like that as a caregiver, you're doing that, you're not getting paid anything financially. You're working just as hard. And you're doing what needs to be done because there's a calling within each and every one of us to be able to show up, be able to serve, especially our family or our friends during those times. So I'm spending at least 25% of my time in small town Colorado with my parents and my sister and brother-in-law. And then when I'm down in Pasadena, my girlfriend, Karen Epps, some of you know her, Reverend Karen from Unity of Pasadena. Bravo, yes. Shout out to Karen. Hi, Karen. She's a minister down at Unity of Pasadena. I speak there rarely, but occasionally she'll ask me to speak. But my main role there is the church handyman. I'm the guy fixing the toilets, changing the light bulbs, digging up the sprinkler system out back when it's not working, painting inside and out, fixing things. And you know, it's a joy because I remember a man that helped at Unity in Marin named Dave Boynton. And I'm sure he's still there, who showed up all the time when something was broken. And he would be the guy to fix it. He would be that volunteer you could count on. And 99% of the people never knew. It was in the background. It was more invisible to do that, but it was so important, and I appreciated it so much, and I felt pride that I have the opportunity now to be that person at this church, to be able to be that person that's not on the stage, but the person in the background doing work that needs to be done. And I know there are people here at this church that are those volunteers. There's only so many that can be the ministers, right? Be up here or the singers, but there are people that if it wasn't for the volunteers and the people in sacred service, that this community would not still be here. Can I get an amen to that? So I look around and I see people here from Unity and Marin who are those people for me, who are in the background, that you wouldn't know all the things that they did, but I knew. And I appreciated it. So there's so many different ways in which we can show up in sacred service. Some are very visible and high profile, and some more invisible and low profile. But however it is that we're called to serve, it is extremely important for our own growth, our own soul growth, our own love and ways in which we can express that. There's a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, who said this, speaking of being in service to others: a nation's greatness is measured by how it treats its weakest members. And I remember when I was a child, I think the first taste of service that I got, it's probably as old as Fonzie back there. How old are you now? 8. There you go. When I was that age, maybe even a little younger, that my mom used to take me out to visit the migrant workers. We lived in suburbia, but it was right there where all the fields, the cornfields, and migrant workers would come in. And they would be the ones working those fields. And what my mom would do is she would bring me with her, and we would sit with all the other young children and make crafts. My mom was very good. We'd make toys out of things you would throw away, but my mom was so crafty. She could make anything, and it was fun to do it, and the kids were in such joy. And I wondered, well, where were all their parents? Well, there were other parents that were teaching them English. And I remember looking at the migrant workers' houses. They weren't really houses, they were huts on dirt floors. And that made an impression on me that it still lives to this day, wondering how is it that I could have running water and that they have a dirt floor? So I think my mom had a real impact on me early on about the importance of service in our lives. Now, when it comes to this idea of serving life, you can interpret it many different ways. Some of the people that I know that are in service to humanity are also in service to animals, the animal kingdom, going to the Humane Society, doing all kinds of things. So there's so much involved in serving life that it's not just what we're doing with each other as human beings. There's other ways we show up, and I love animals. I've had so many dogs in my life, and they've been some of the wisest beings I've ever known. Now, interesting to note that Charles and Myrtle Fillmore were vegetarian. And in fact, they wrote out 32 statements of faith. Here's number 28, which you probably have not heard of before. And it says this: we believe that all life is sacred and that man should not kill or be a party to the killing of animals for food. Also, that cruelty, war, and wanton destruction of human life will continue so long as men destroy animals. Hear, hear. Amen. There's a dog in the second row. Now think about that. Now, this is the 1890s. I'm a vegetarian. I became a vegetarian before I ever came to Unity, and I became a vegetarian in Kansas City. Now, it's not easy being a vegetarian, but I got to tell you, it is not easy at all being a vegetarian in Kansas City, the beef capital of the world. And here, 100 years before almost, we've got the Fillmores talking about how important it is to be vegetarian. In fact, they opened up a vegetarian restaurant in Kansas City, and it was one of the most popular places in town. People would get bussed over to have lunch at that vegetarian restaurant. And this whole idea about cruelty and war and wanton destruction will continue as long as men destroy animals. I can speak from my personal experience, that when I became a vegetarian, I felt less aggressive. I don't know if that's because of the hormones they put in animals or whatever, but I just look at that and I think how progressive the Fillmores were back at that time, and now their ideas are progressive. And we get to be able to learn from them and grow from them, and still reading things like this, you think that could have been written yesterday. Yes, it was written in the 1890s. Now, serving life can also take on other aspects. Anybody here interested in the planet? That's right. Okay. So they're serving life. The planet is life. It's a living, breathing organism. What are we doing in service to life on the planet? Many of us are called to do things, whether it could be as simple as recycling. It could be talking about global warming. It could be all kinds of things where we can get involved and say, it's important that we take care of this planet that is nurturing us and has continued to nurture us. How are we showing up? So there's different ways we can show up in service in life. Why do we do it? I believe it's core to who it is that we are as human beings, that we are called to be in service. When we are serving others, the planet, animals, etc., there is a joy that comes up. There's a knowingness that comes up that says, this is right, and it connects me to my higher self. In fact, if you're feeling depressed at all about anything, my prescription is to go be in service, to go volunteer at a soup kitchen, be a person here that greets people, do something, walk animals at the Humane Society, be in service. It gets us out of whatever it is that we're feeling depressed about, and it's showing this is who it is that we really are. Let's get out there and let's do that. And it's a lot cheaper than therapy. I tell you. And when it comes to this feeling of joy, I take that as a dog for, you're doing great. That's, some people have told me, they say, Bill, I've met this teacher, and I think they're, really enlightened, and how do I know? And I said, well, I've never met an enlightened person that went around and said, I'm enlightened, for one. You may think they are, and maybe they are. But I said, the test for me is I ask them, well, how are they serving? What are they doing? How do they show up in service to life? And when you see that they're serving life, so, well, then you've got an indication that maybe they are on this enlightened path. But if they're not showing up in service at all, I have a question about that. I believe actions tell all. Now, my father, with the Parkinson's and all the other issues, we wanted to keep him at home as long as possible, and we were able to up until a few weeks ago. We had to have him go into the VA, a nursing home in that town. And actually, this VA is wonderful. They're filled with wonderful people, and it was really hard, but when he started falling down and my 90-year-old mother was trying to catch him, that's not a good scenario, right? So he's in the VA now, and I met a man there who was in the VA. He had some strokes, and he got better, and now he's out. But what he does is he comes back every week, and he talks to the new people and tells them that he came in and he was also able to leave, and even if they have to stay, here's some things that they can do, and he's really inspiring, and he comes back every week to help people. You don't read about him in the papers. There's no applause. He does it simply from that place of knowing that's his role at this point in life, to show up in service in that way, and to me, that's incredibly, incredibly inspiring to see that in practice. You may have heard of Brother Lawrence, a monk in a monastery, and people look at him and say, now, there's a guy that's really got it all together. They want to spend time with him, and you know what he did at the monastery? He washed dishes. He was in service that way. And what came across was that he recognized that God isn't there when we're holy and we're praying and we're meditating. He said God's in it all. So even in washing dishes, there's the presence of God right there in that moment. So he was in service in those moments. And in his entire life, that motivated so many people that's where they want to go when they visit the monastery. Where's the dishwasher? Right? That is inspiring. Now, there's another way to interpret this idea of serving life. Something that comes to me often is that I've been volunteering, and I continue to volunteer in San Quentin. And the men that I work with are all serving life sentences. And I've been working with them for almost 3 years now. Used to be I'd be there every week when I lived in Nevada, but now in Pasadena I fly up once a month to spend time with the men. Now when it comes to serving life, most of them will never get out of prison. Yet at the same time, if you would have blindfolded me when I first met these men, I would have thought I was in a monastery. Because of the depth of wanting to know who it is that they are, and the wanting to be able to understand who they are and why they did what they did and who they are today and how they're different. And most of these people, these men committed crimes and they're in their 20s or teens. Now it's 20, 30, 40 years later, they're not that same person. But we were talking about legacy not too long ago. And many of the men talked about how when they get out, then they're going to volunteer and they're going to do this, and there's so many organizations that they're going to help, and I know they mean it. In their heart, they mean it. And I affirm if they do get out that that's what they'll do, but I also reminded them that your legacy isn't going to just start when you get out of prison. And your legacy isn't also the worst thing that you ever did in your life. We're all greater than the worst thing we ever did. All of us. And so I talked about that legacy and said, what are you doing now in prison? Because this is where your legacy is going to be for the next, who knows, 10, 20, the rest of your life. And we talked a lot about that. And there are saints in prison, I'm here to tell you. There's a man named Muhammad that's in the group. And as far as I'm concerned, he could be venerated tomorrow. In prison for more than 20-some years. And he's the person that everybody in San Quentin knows they can go to if they have a problem. If they need a bar of soap, if they need ramen noodles, if they need something, he's the guy they go to. If they need a shoulder to cry on, he will be that person for them. If they need to talk through their problems, he's the guy. In fact, after 20 plus years in prison, he actually got paroled not too long ago. And as that was happening, everyone was the guards loved him. Everybody loved him. They were so happy for him. And my question to the men in the group is, who's going to take his place? You all know and love him, so there's going to be this hole. Now, who's going to be the person or persons to be the new Muhammad in San Quentin? And I know that many of them are stepping up now to fill that gap, to be that person that they want to be where they are right now. And I find oftentimes we think, well, I'll be a better person when I get this other job or when I move or when I make X amount of money. No, it's now. It's the time. It's the time for change. And if they can do that in San Quentin, we can certainly do it in our lives right here and right now. And what about serving life, serving God? In Hinduism, there's 3 different practices. There's karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and jnana yoga. Now, karma yoga is the path of action. And I believe Charles Fillmore and Myrtle Fillmore were both really aligned with that idea of action. It's where you act selflessly without thought of personal gain. And then there's bhakti yoga, which is the path of devotion, and I really felt that from Myrtle Fillmore and her teachings and her writings, her utter devotion, her utter commitment to God and knowing, without having to intellectualize, just knowing that God is here within each and every one of us. I saw her essence in her writings and everyone who had met with her, and I knew her granddaughter, Rosemary Fillmore Ray, just a wonderful person. She's told me many stories. But she had that expression. And then there's jnana yoga, which is the most difficult part, and that's the use of the mind to inquire into one's own nature and experience unity with God. And when I think of Charles Fillmore, he's the one that always wanted to know intellectually, how is this working? There's healings happening in the living room with Myrtle Fillmore. The lame are walking, the blind are getting their sight. He wants to know, how is this working? So he studied and studied and studied. He came at it from that perspective. And the wonderful thing about all of his intellectualizing was that he looked at so many different spiritual practices and religions, and every one of them said they have it and everyone else is wrong. That didn't make sense to Charles, and he said, you know what I'm going to do? If this is true, if there is this energy, if there is this God, if there's this spirit, well, I'm going to open myself up to hear what that has to say. And so he was a businessman, so he made an appointment with God. Every day he sat by the fireplace, just a business meeting. That's how we looked at it. He sat, and I'm just going to wait. And this went on months and months and months, where every day he would sit in what we would call meditation or silence, but he wasn't, chanting or burning incense or anything else. He was a businessman. He just sat there waiting. Then finally he started to recognize in his dreams that Spirit was speaking to him, and the service was an important thing, and not only understanding as much as we can of these unity principles, but putting them into action. In fact, what they found in Charles's desk after he and Myrtle Fillmore made their transition, I'm going to read to you. It's called Their Dedication and Covenant. Now, this is not something they put out and let everybody know. This is something that they made, their covenant with God, and they wrote it out and they signed it. And here's what it says. Dedication and Covenant. We, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, husband and wife, hereby dedicate ourselves, our time, our money, all that we have and all we expect to have to the Spirit of truth, and through it, the Society of Silent Unity. It being understood and agreed that the said Spirit of truth shall render unto us an equivalent for the dedication in peace of mind, health of body, wisdom, understanding, love, life, and an abundant supply of all things necessary to meet every want without making any of these things the object of our existence. In the presence of the conscious mind of Christ, Jesus, the 7th day of December, 1892. Talk about dedicating their lives to service. They made a covenant. They made an agreement. They wrote it out between the two of them. And we are the recipients here today of that kind of dedication and that covenant, and that dedication to service is amazing then, and it's amazing now. I get motivated by seeing people in service, whether it's Dave Boynton, who was the handyman, probably still is, out of Unity in Marin, whether it's Brother Lawrence doing the dishes, being in service, whether it was my mother working with migrant children back in the 60s, that every one of those actions, generally not very visible, made an impact on me. And I believe it makes an impact on the world when we are in service, when we are serving life on whatever level it is that we are called, in whatever area that we are called. That's why we are here, is to serve life. And if people can serve life in the most difficult situations, if Muhammad could be that saintly figure in prison, we can do it wherever it is that we are, right here, right now, in the present moment. So my spiritual practice, when it comes to this idea of serving life, first and foremost, and this has been the hardest thing, is to not contend with life. What that means is when people, situations, and circumstances show up in ways that I don't think they should. Am I the only one? That it used to just grip me. I want to change them. If they change, then I'll be better. They're wrong. I'm right. That's contending with life. But when I see whatever it is that's happened, I can accept whatever it is that's happened and then deal with that instead of fighting it. Now, maybe I see what's happened. I can accept that it's happened and I work for change. But that's totally different from when something shows up and I'm just sitting in the corner being angry and spending all my energy about fighting life. If I'm going to serve life, I know the first and foremost thing I have to do is to be able to accept what is, to surrender to what is, to not fight against life, to not get caught up using all my energy and worry, because I know when I do that, I suffer. I suffer when I contend with life. So I ask myself this question: can I be in service to life no matter what shows up? Things may show up I don't agree with, and I'd like to see changed. If I'm fighting it, that's where all my energy goes. If I can figure out how can I serve life, how can I bring about the kind of change that I think is worthwhile by being in service to my fellow man, to be in service to the animals, to be in service to the planet, to be in service to God. If I can focus on being in service, then I know I feel so much better and so much relieved. And I believe that is the legacy that I want to leave in this life. So I'd ask each of us this question: can we be in service to life no matter what shows up? So the next time we get aggravated or upset or angry, can we say, how can I be in service to life? I believe if we do that, that's the seeds to making this the heaven on earth that it can be. I always end my talks with a denial and an affirmation. So they're going to come up on the screen here first. I'll say the denial out loud, then I'll invite you to say it with me. The denial is: situations and circumstances have no power over me. Together? Situations and circumstances have no power over me. And the affirmation, I'll say it first: being in service to God, life is my highest calling. Together? Being in service to God, life is my highest calling. Thank you so much, Deanne, and give Ken my love when you see them. And thank you for having me here. And thank you to my friends.
So we're going to step into our time of meditation.